that the land is ours because the ancient text says so. And the other side says, well, ours is ours. We bought it and we paid it for it. Right.
Okay. Sorry for all of that. I'm trying to stream this live on YouTube for those who can't make it in person. Trying to be more inclusive. I want to thank you guys for coming in person. Nothing against anyone who's streaming it, just because I like teaching in person. I want to be with you. So for me, it's an act of making community in person. But I also know there are people for whom it's really challenging to get here, and I want it in all kinds of ways. I want to be fully inclusive. So I'm not recording it for my own ego, because it's the opposite. Like, as soon as I see myself recorded, I hate my voice, and I hate what I'm doing, and I'm procrastinating too much and trying to get my point out, and I'm not being clear. So it's an ego killer, but I also want to be inclusive. So thanks to someone who's looking at me right now and taking in our class. I also say too much, and so for you, I'm going to face my weaknesses. I want to devote today's study. We should devote it, remind me every time to devote it to someone who could use some healing, or to the memory of someone. And although there are many who could use healing tonight, I also know that Rabbi Jules Harlow just died. Rabbi Jules Harlow was a very significant conservative rabbi who wrote the Harlow Siddur, which really became the Sim Shalom. And for many of us, it wasn't very long ago we switched from the Jules Harlow Matzor on High Holy Days to the Matzor Lev Shalom. And so definitely someone who devoted himself to providing more accessible translations and more egalitarian kind of work. So to the memory of Jules Harlow, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. I'm hoping, I expect that we'll have some more conversation this time. I don't have tons of text like I usually do, but we'll see where we get. And let's start with the text. Does anybody need a copy of our one page of text? I'm going to save Kabbalistic text number 3. I never get to it. Isn't there some comedy routine where it's like, I was going to start with this text on the first day, so we're at the 6th time, and I'm still like, you know what, let's see if we get to it at the end. So Kabbalistic text 3, I never seem to get to, but I will. But maybe we'll end up ending on it at the end of February. And so let's go forward to last time we did the Zohar text, Sex by the Sages on Leil Shabbat. We can go back to it if you want. Not that we had all satisfied or exhausted it, because I don't understand all of it, but I'm going to go back to a little piece of it in a minute. But before we do that, let's go on. And I bet you want to do another text. Now, this art green would be similar to what we might do if we decide to do a Kabbalah Intensive 2. I think what that would be, and I don't mean starting at March 1st or something as soon as this one's done at the end of February. But one possibility for a sequel to this course would be a reading course. If we do reading courses, this is the first time I'm basically giving you a sense of what the kind of thing we'd read. It would be what a scholar writes about Kabbalah, because the Sex by the Sages on Sabbath Eve is more like a primary text. After all of these years where I've taught it and I've studied it, and even buying like the latest Moshe Idel book, Male and Female, Equality, Female Theurgy and Procreation, in Rav Moshe Cordovero's Dual Ontology, even working through that, I'm not sure I would understand the text we did last week. So that primary text, like one way to go is we read primary text we don't quite understand, but like we give it our best shot. And I mean, I can certainly help you a lot. I just can't guarantee you I'm right with the things I'm saying. Or to read sort of secondary material that have very smart people who are trying to digest things for us. So who would like to read? And I might just have you read the whole thing. Today's topic, actually we have multiple topics today, but because it's a quick intensive with concision. Evil in Kabbalah. Massive topic. If you want to, you can read Prime Evil in Kabbalah, also by Moshe Idel, because he writes about this much every month and publishes it. It's It's very dense academic work and it's fantastic. And I've been dipping into it. One of the things you will find, as I've been saying all through the course, is there are multiple Kabbalahs. So when you have a really great scholar like Edel, a lot of what he's going to be telling you is, you think you can explain it this way? Well, some of it, yes, but that totally is the wrong way to understand this other part of it. There's so many Kabbalahs. So, one of them, last week was that if a woman enjoys the sex at midnight on Friday night, that's a bad thing, because that's like a demon is possessing her. But another person could be like, no, Malchut and Yesod getting along in a jointly enjoyable sexual act within the context of covenant and holiness is beautiful. You could have opposite things within Kabbalah, kind of depends who wrote that text, who their influences are. In that way, it's like rabbinic thought, which is you kind of, I quote Rabbi this, yeah, but Rabbi so-and-so hated that position, so I quote this guy. So there we go. Who would like to read the Art Green text for us? Raise your hand.
Kabbalistic text 3. Moshe
Oh, skip over that. We're going to save that. Go down to the bottom where it says from Art Green.
Oh, from Mark all the way down.
Yeah.
Okay.
You still want to read?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people who wouldn't want to read Art Green after last week's news.
Okay. Yes, God is the one source of all that is.
Okay, it's settled. We can go home now. Okay.
But somehow, in the transmission of that divine presence into this worldly garb, there has been a tragic fault or flaw, a rebellion within the lesser cosmic forces, or perhaps an unwillingness of the lower worlds to receive God's light, allowing the forces of evil to exist, even to achieve awesome power. Gerona Kabbalists depict evil as a pale imitation of the
Sephirotic.
Realm with the same tenfold structure of the world of divinity, but it is a mere shadow. Oh, this is long. A mocking invitation of the divine dream.
Realm.
Of the divine
realm. Illusory, God.
I told you we're reading scholarship.
World has power only over those foolish enough to take it for true.
Mhm.
The Zohar, more agnostic, developed a vision of the Sitra Achra, the other side, which plays a significant role in the Zoharic mythos. In one image, the Zohar describes the Sitra Achra as a series of
Klipot.
klipot, 4 interlocking shells surrounding the realm of divinity and constituting a side of impurity. The image of the shell surrounding and protecting the inner content of a particular divine constellation was part of the older Kabbalistic legacy. But in the Zohar, these shells take on the frightening countenance of actively demonic forces. Their names, stormy wind, huge cloud, flashing fire, and radiance were derived from Ezekiel surrounding the divine chariot. Radiance, Noga, the shell closest to the worlds of divinity, is viewed as a mixture of good and evil, capable of interaction with divinity. The innermost core of the Sitra Achara, Ruach Se'ara,
You're getting the hang of this, Mike.
stormy wind, is a domain of unalloyed defilement. How to explain all this comes from Ein Sof.
No, that's fine.
Oh, how to explain when all this comes from Ein Sof.
So how can all this evil be pouring forth from God?
Sometimes by reference to a fiery dross emitted by Gevura at the moment of emanation. Sometimes as tension between Hesed and Gevura. Sometimes as the exile of anger and harshness out of the emerging divine self. When all the world, above and below, exist in a state of perfect balance and harmony. The other side is under the firm control of the Sephirot and plays a positive role in the management of the world, functioning as an obedient, punishing rod of divine justice. However, when the worlds are askew and imbalanced, Sitra Achara develops an independent will in its quest for autonomous life fueled by the divine light and energy. It oversteps its bounds and strives to usurp the place of Tiferet or Yesod in the Holy Union, snatching the Shekhinah and the world from its embrace. The demons, Samuel, Lily, or Naamah, and their host all set the task of leading humans into sin, for it is only through the energy released to them in acts of human transgression that they receive the life energy they need to sustain themselves. The forces of evil are powerless unless given energy from below, counterbalanced by Israel and its Sadakim.
Good, thank you.
What did I say?
So there's a lot in there. And let's try to put it in sort of plain language. I thought that's one area that's a very good summary of different Kabbalistic views on the nature of evil. So let's remember a complex teaching I gave last time, and I'm going to try to put it in a simpler way right now. There is a fine line between theology and mysticism and superstition. Because in a way, what mysticism is trying to do, and the part I'm sympathetic to, is to say that there's a sense in which we live in a larger reality that moves in ways that we maybe only have intuitions of. Let's just say, I'll throw out the word psychic, because I want to be simple. There's psychic realities that might be going on, that paranormal, that like the system is bigger than we think it is. And the world is more complicated than what is dreamt up in Horatio's philosophy. So as I said, you might be absolutely convinced, I understand the world as it is, I'm a skeptic. I get this from certain people in my middle school classes, often boys, but both. Like what you're suggesting isn't possibly true because I stick with just the facts, man, right? Well, what a mystic says is, so what if your tools aren't picking up all the facts? What if the world is more than what you can measure? Or in addition, I'll mention the cosmological principle, which Kant put extraordinarily well. If you ever want to read that with me, you can go through the Prolegomena to any future metaphysics. It's fantastic. It's his best work. Everybody walks around with some idea, some general idea of how the universe works. It's basically your view of when you say, if someone says, how does the universe work? It's kind of how you answer. Now, you don't answer, well, I read journals of scientific results, and then if there's a result, I go by it. I'm a skeptic, so there has to be a result. No, then you're in denial of the fact that you have some basic general idea of how the whole thing works. And a good idea of the way to call that is your general paradigm, which was something that Thomas Kuhn made famous in a very, very good book, which talks about science has paradigms. It becomes, there's a certain kind of understanding of the universe. Eventually data builds up that this guy tested it, and that person was before their time, and that woman tested it, but no one listened to her because she was a woman. Eventually enough evidence builds up that they're like, the big picture is the universe is not a mechanistic machine like a big clock, but it's something more like space-time and curvatures. And you're like, oh, okay, now we got that. Now everything has to conform to that, and then enough things happen that eventually someone says, but the math doesn't add up. Maybe there's something called superstring theory, and maybe that's what's going on, and people argue about that for decades. And so his attitude is, but it was a larger point in Kuhn's work, because it was really Kantian. We all have a paradigm. Most people's paradigms are largely Darwinian. I mean, I talk to people all the time, I bet you do too. So they have an idea, well, come on, there's capitalism because it's just natural that people compete and then the fittest survive and that's the way it ought to be or something like that. But a lot of times it's very Darwinian. or it's very mechanistic. Most people still have a pretty Newtonian idea of how the universe works. And then you run into a problem, which is you sit down with a physicist for lunch and you find out that they're laughing at you about the way you think the universe works. Because they're like, that's really cute that you think us scientists think that, and we don't think that. And I remember I was trying to teach this idea when I first got here in 2018. I thought I'd throw you like my best stuff. And so I had a session, and I did a session on eukaryocytes and prokaryocytes, and basically on this idea of what you think evolution is, and what the latest ideas of evolution are, and how the latest ideas of evolution match Kabbalistic principles, right? And there were like two people there who were like jumping up and down at the end, who were like, I always knew this. Thank God someone else knew about eukaryocytes and prokaryocytes and the fact that the way people think evolution happens doesn't happen. That's been long disproven. And fortunately, Bob Blumenthal was there, and that's his field. And so when people said I was wrong, he stood up. He was like, no, the rabbis got that right. So like he's gonna go. So the idea is we have a way of the way the universe functions. Most of us couldn't possibly believe for a moment that it's wrong. Just like Newtonians couldn't believe that there would be something like relativity, or that there's something called curvature of space-time. Even now, I mean, what discovery of the fact that more than half the universe is dark matter is not something, or could be, and I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. What I am saying is we operate with our picture of what the universe is. And William James, as I often quote in all my courses, my favorite quote is, he says in The Varieties of Religious Experience, brilliantly, one of the greatest American philosophers who ever lived, William James said, really what your religion is basically your relationship to the universe as a whole. And the universe as a whole, he doesn't use the word paradigm, but he's read Kant. Early pragmatism is just based on a conversation with Kant through Charles Peirce and others at Harvard, is that your relation, the universe itself is never an object of experience, and it's never an empirically testable object of experience. In other words, ultimately, I can say, I'm going to try to convince you, Rowan, that your picture of the way the universe works is wrong, but I can't be like, I have a piece of, I can prove that my picture is right. So that our picture of what the universe is overall is never really truly defensible. We say, I think it kind of works like this, and I can tell you that this works for me in life, and it matches my experience, and then, maybe at some point you realize we're all wrong, because everyone's going with the Darwinian view, and modern evolutionary theory is no longer there, and you're like, oh, I guess maybe I shouldn't be a capitalist. And so the Kabbalist, a mystic is basically saying, the universe we live in is much more mysterious than you think. And I'm going to tell you that it works in interesting and strange and wonderful ways, and I want you to open your mind to invisible forces that you've never thought were possible, possibilities that were never considered by you, because they have this kind of larger paradigm. But then there's a problem, which is, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, which is the mystical paradigm is we don't really fully understand what's going on. There are larger things we can't see, but we get intuitions about them, and we have ideas, and we have experiences that come through meditation, and experiences that come through contemplation. And they list them, and we have wise people who say, you may never have had this experience yourself, and I'm telling you, I'm giving you a secret about the universe. We realize, whoa, there's more going on when I'm in this room than it looks like for people who have a picture that's a bunch of bodies, individual subjects who have their own, like the mind-body problem is real, your own minds in your own bodies, we're all separate, we're just transmitting things back and forth, it's like a telephone call, and a mystic would come in and be like, there is so much more going in this room than you think. Like, we are so interconnected along an energy grid of things that are happening, and we're also held in the palm of a larger force. The Germans called it the Zeitgeist, or you can call it something else, and there's so much larger if you actually want to try to understand what's going on. But then there's a temptation to map it out. So you're like, okay, this big, like this mysterious reality that we have intuitions about, and wisdom, and experiences, and things that we've trusted out. You're like, Nadav, try doing this with prayer now as my Kabbalistic disciple. And I try it, and I say, whoa, that worked for me. Like, that was incredible. I didn't know that was possible. So intuitions, wisdom, experience. And then I get so excited, I'm like, I'm going to map this whole thing out. So then I take this larger reality and I map out, like, and there is zero mystery anymore. I consider this idolatry. When you basically say, my picture of how the universe works just is the way the universe works, then you're saying my relationship with my God, like, that's God. And you're like, I'm not open to the fact that I may not have God exactly right, or God is, I can't know that, I can't prove it, I can't define it. So now we go back to the evil, but I'll take Mike's point or anyone else's point, and then we'll go back to the text.
I have a question about this text and what I just read. And
Sure, of course you do.
I totally understand it. But the sense I have reading it is that it is totally not Jewish. And the reason is that suddenly there are all these forces that the demon, I mean, it sounds like I'm reading from some Christian whatever, but there are all these forces that are playing on me, and it's not part of the divine anymore, it's part of these weird things going on, and it just strikes me as not what I think about when I think about God, or think about Judaism, or think about what it means to be a good Jew, or think about why there's even evil in the world. I don't imagine that some little, whatever is sneaking around trying to screw things up.
So a lot of people have said that. A lot of people have said that they feel that Kabbalah is really un-Jewish. The only question, or it feels very Christian. The only question I would ask you is, does that come from your ideas of what are Jewish and not Jewish?
Of course.
And have your ideas been shaped? Have been shaped by socio-historical and cultural forces? For example, I mean, people like Sholem and Edel write about this a lot. I was just reading about it earlier today in preparation for this class. That, like, even our understanding of what Kabbalah is was shaped by the thinkers who created 19th and 20th century European and American Judaism, who were almost all utter reform, even if they went by the name conservative, utterly reformed German rationalist ethical thinkers who said, well, among gentlemen like ourselves, we know that Judaism, its real true name is ethical monotheism, meaning we're very comfortable with ethics. We're very comfortable by saying ethics is based in something called monotheism that we just don't talk much about. And so that when we come from that, we're like, and by the way, your normal experience of reality, Harvey, that really is what reality is. It's just, we're not here to challenge the gentleman German or the gentleman American, right? Of course, then you get all these uncomfortable Hasids who moved here between 1880 and 1920, who are all like, so the borscht has a special spice in it which will produce 8 children for you if you give me $30. And by the way, hang this from your door. And then you're like, did you get that from some weird Eastern Orthodoxy stuff from Russia? And they're like, no, it's Jewish. So all I'm saying is that there's a lot more in the richness of Judaism than you might think. And even like I was reading in Edel today that he's like, look, a lot of this you'll find. You know how I did the early part of the course and I was showing things in Mishnah and Torah? There's a lot of Midrash too. I mean, he was saying the same thing I was teaching. In other words, all these fancy scholars, they'll eventually come to the great Rav Nadav and realize I've been right all along. No, which is that we have been predisposed to ignore those parts of the canon. So are we just not going to deal with the fact that Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva were like meditating and doing Dveikus? This is 2,000 years ago. They were meditating and cleaving to God so they can experience the Godhead and see the vision of Ezekiel, and so that there's something called a Godhead that can manifest as a vision of the invisible reality that's actually happening in front of you. And all this uncomfortable stuff we ignore, which is, what does it mean that there's a cloud going through the wilderness and it has God's presence in it, and then Moses communes with it, and then he forgot to put on his cap, and when he didn't put on his cap, there were light beams shining out of his head. And people are like, I know, it's a really good story. We did it in 3rd grade. And then we move on, as if it's not for adults to take seriously. But I know I spent too much time on that. Damn, because we got to do evil. Someone be evil.
Not exactly, Bobby.
Okay, we'll act it out.
I recall reading something about demons that I thought was Babylonian, Indian Talmud, they have names.
Yes, so, good. So
Does
let-
this derive, do these demons derive from those
Yes.
demons?
Yeah, they do. I mean, there's some that, I mean, there may be more experts out there than I, and I'm the stuff I've studied, but I haven't retained well. Where do the names of demons come from? Some of them come from Jewish lore itself, some come from outside, like Metatron. But, so, let's take a look at
What's
this.
the Hebrew word for demon? Is there a Hebrew word?
What is the word for demon? I don't have it fresh in my head at the moment, so I will
Is
be
there
honest.
one?
There must be in these texts, because they're in Hebrew. If I brought the Hebrew text today for Zebi, he could find it for me. But let's look at this for a second and go back to the art green, and let's just talk about some of the ways, some of the ideas of evil, multiple ideas of evil. Start with the easy one, right? Easy one would be, and I have more of these if you want, but I can already memorize. So easy one, and art green mentions it, is imbalance between Gevurah and Chesed. One of my favorites, I talk about it a lot. So evil is produced by, let's just say, either a flow of too much open, undiscriminating, forgiving, merciful, loving kindness, expansive kindness, when focus, channeling, order, discrimination, boundaries were necessary. So boundarylessness when you needed boundaries, or too many boundaries when some love and openness and forgiving of boundaries and overcoming boundaries was necessary. So one could be straight up imbalance. When imbalance happens, the channels get blocked up, right? Or they really get thrown off so that the energies that are filtering, they say up to down, but I was trying to say, it's every spot that you could identify in a three-dimensional structure. So at any XYZ point you identify on our three-dimensional world has the flow coming through it. But they just say it's coming from the supernal realm. So imbalance. And I use the simple example of a spoiled child, too much chesed, or an overly disciplined, beaten child or whatever, or too much gevurah. Or it could be that it's not just lots of one or lots of the other, but it's the wrong moment, right? So in this moment, I should have channeled one thing into the room, and I didn't, and so that will cause a ripple that brings mischief, causes mischief in the world, or even evil. So the one time the student, I can't remember, I thought it was Martin Buber, I shouldn't say the story if I'm not right, but I thought Martin Buber said that there was a student that came to his office, thought the student's name was Daniel, who seemed troubled, but Martin Buber said, read some more books on the syllabus, whatever a professor says during office hours. And the student took his own life, and Martin Buber said, that's my memory of the story, because I think he wrote an essay about it. And when he started switching from Kabbalah and Hasidic scholarship to writing the book I Thou. Because the book I Thou, which Martin Buber said, is, I'm trying to summarize all Hasidism without any reference to it. I'm trying to put it, like I'm trying to do in this course on some level, to give you plain language that I use to live my life, and you don't have to read the Zohar if you don't want to, or we can spend all our time reading the Zohar, that would be fun, but I'm more interested in how you would apply this to your life. So his attitude is, one moment of missing something caused evil, and what are the ripple effects of that? So I Thou was about really being sensitive to the moment and knowing what the moment demanded. So that's one. Another is that he says, so there's imbalance and that causes it. So another is, since there is a sense that the divine, there's a flow in and there's a flow upward or a flow out, right? Because of time, because of the black space between each of the movie frames, there's this interplay happening at any moment. So yes, there's an influx, and there's us sort of pushing the other way. But what if there is a problem with the influx getting to us? It gets tainted along the way. So the message, we're getting a message from God, and it gets garbled. So that's the first thing he says. Somehow in the transmission of the divine presence into this worldly garb, there has been a tragic fault or flaw, rebellion within the lesser cosmic forces. there's an inability, we're still trying to put the infinite into the finite, and there's an inability to contain it. We saw that with the shattering of the vessels, right? So we've already seen that in a way there's a flaw in the reality, except for someone like me, there's no flaw in the fact that the finite can't contain the infinite. We just know that the finite, well, I mean, but then there is a flaw. I mean, let's be honest, right? When I do the vidui with people, when I do the deathbed Jewish prayer, the deathbed Jewish prayer says, basically, God, you're the God of my ancestors, I've let you down, I've let myself down, and I've let others down, because there's no way to be perfect in this world. And then I tell the person, listen, you know, if you feel like you were the wrong person for your daughter, we each have a temperament, right? I've got my temperament, I've got my little set of skills and my set of weaknesses. And sometimes we get the kid who needed a different parent, or seems like they needed a different parent, or gave us a speech about needing a different parent, you know, and we're like, maybe you needed a different parent, or maybe you're just whiny. I don't know. You know, I mean, you're like, go, I'm sorry. So that's, the video is like, look, you're imperfect. You can't be everywhere at once. Maybe they were like, you weren't there at the birth of my first child, but you're like, maybe you were there for a student who was trying to pull their act together or gonna leave school. So is there a flaw? There's a problem with trying to get the infinite into the finite, and or in these transmissions, things get messed up. One way it could get messed up is that this kind of paradigm is that we had it, which is that there's sort of matter and there's sort of energy. And I really like that metaphor, and I like the sense that I think in my cosmological idea, my paradigm that I operate in, I think energy is a really useful concept. I think processes are a really useful concept. I think that being sensitive to the fact that there's more going on in any moment is super powerful. But if you're going to have an energy in your paradigm, that sure sounds like light, and matter can really quickly become darkness, limitation. And if you're from the Catholic Church, Mike, I'm giving you credit here, sin. Which I know Mike was getting at. I mean, this sounds like, I mean, part of what you're getting at. There's more. I'm not saying I'm containing it. But you can really quickly get to a place where matter is fallen. Matter is in a fallen state. And we live in a fallen world. And there's good reason to think that in the ancient world, part of what was going on, as I said last time, was you have a strong sense in the rabbis that we're comfortable with, I certainly am, that kind of start in the middle of things where the world is not, the world as we see it is also true, and we're supposed to use our brains and figure things out and do our best. But there was also this other kind of Platonic, Neoplatonic, Gnostic view that there's an invisible world and there's a competition in that world of light and darkness. Our world is a really flawed world, and there's some kind of hidden, perfect structure that's struggling to express itself, right? There's a perfect you inside of you that is struggling to get out, but it's been wounded, and you had the wrong mother, and then you had the bad professor, so it's really easy. So it's a human thing, and it's in Judaism too. I mean, I can find it in Midrashim, that it's just we're not used to them, that like there's perfect you struggling to get out. And there's a perfect, guess what? There's a perfect divine form struggling to get out all the time. But you just can't get that perfect image of God. We can't get it all together. Sometimes we just got the Gevura when we're really lucky, or we just had this going on. And so you can suddenly get the sense that this reality is hopeless. It's just hopeless. Go ahead, Zoe.
If you can help me maybe by repeating the connection. I mean, I can see where energy and light can be connected. I can see where energy and matter can be opposites, and why we would like to show the opposite of light being the darkness. But that necessary connection between matter and darkness is unclear to me.
Good. So, and that's a good concrete question. So like, I'll take it away from this kind of Neoplatonic thing and just go right to the Klipot. So we saw in the myth of the creation, which is that, there's Ein Sof, and Ein Sof is an energy. It is a form of divine or Zarua Latzadi Ul Yishrei, shattering Lev Simcha, taking to the shattered a heart of happiness. That there's this divine energy, and the energy tries to become matter, and it starts to become matter, and that is in its initial, it's not yet matter, Keter state. It is, you can have sort of infinite no-thingness, where nothing has happened yet. But eventually, as matter forms, there's an explosion. And so we are, everything in the universe that we live in is the result of a shattering of the vessels. So we live in shattered vessels. And then they say, the light of Ein Sof, or let's say the energy of God, clings to each shard. And remember that in the ancient world, most shards, they're very porous, right? Which is also the basis of a lot of the laws of kashrut, and that's the separate class. But so it's like the shards have absorbed divine essence. So I'll say, forget light and darkness. They're just saying, in one of the quotes that I put out there was, our job is, it's sorting. So you get this a lot in the Kabbalistic text. We are supposed to sort, we're sorting the energies. And we're sorting the energies from matter, and we're sorting the energies from each other, and I'm sorting the energies in the situations I'm in. And so sorting is the good from the bad. So there is a sense in which matter itself is an imperfect container for holy sparks. So if I say, I have a quick lesson for you. You know what Kabbalists think of eating? I'm sorry, I hear this a lot, so I make it cliche. You know what Kabbalists think of eating? You're not just eating I was going to say pork rib. You're not just eating a beef rib, right? You're releasing the sparks within the rib. So whatever went into the animal, now you are releasing the sparks. So it's be like, oh, that's really beautiful. I really like that. But you can fall into the fact that, is matter trapping the sparks? It's not just matter positive and negative, but there's a negativity in that. And what Arthur Green is saying is this. As a Kabbalist, you don't have to be obsessed with evil. I am not obsessed with evil, and I consider myself some form of generic Kabbalist, right? But if you want to be obsessed with evil, you got a lot to work with. Because you got this idea that, oh my God, the energy, it's all trapped. It's trapped everywhere. And Zevi, I'm your therapist. And I'm like, oh my God, it's trapped in you, sir. Your perfect self, good luck. And you too, oh my gosh, okay, the trapped energies. And the trapped energies in everything. And then you start looking at the world and you're like, we're not putting anything together. It's all, so one possibility is things are out of alignment. So things are constantly out of alignment. But what if something, it could be more than that, according to him though. So I'll go more than out of alignment, which is that, what if the structure can be so a kilter that you get forms of existence that are, for better or worse, let's call them demonic. You get forces out there. And I'll use a simple example and then try to make it more complicated. A simple example is you guys must wonder like I do, right? Don't you sit around and think about where do serial killers come from? I always wondering about this stuff, right? It's on TV, the true crime stuff. Where do people get this stuff from? So one idea is, what happened that this person wants to cut up people and eat them piece by piece or whatever it is, and can do these things. And I understand a little bit about sociopathology, but still. So one thing is you could say that there's an energy that gets trapped, or a misalignment, or something produces something, and it's just a kilter. I think there are people running for president that may fall in this category, right? And you're just like, what is up with that? How can they say that? This is who they are. So one idea in Kabbalah is that the energies can get misaligned, or there could be an energy that produces some kind of independent existence. that is just wreaking havoc in this world, kind of like a sci-fi movie or a fantasy movie where you have a demon running around. So like, but whether it is Rupert Murdoch or whatever, I mean, I don't know who it is, but like there is a force behind things at work, at play. And so some Kabbalists really believe that. Some of them go so far, not all of them, they get so obsessed with evil that they actually believe maybe there's a shadow structure. So this is a good one, Nadav. I'm just doing the kind of thing the mystics do. What if you turned it around? And there was a light. You see, if you hold it up against the light. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? This is the kind of stuff they try to talk about, right? They're like, there's a shadow version of the same one, but it's backward, right? How did that happen? So, I mean, I didn't make up this stuff. So one possibility is some of them get so obsessed with evil that they're like, this society is so screwed up. Let's just say our American society is so screwed up. We're only, 25, 30 trillion in debt. People say we'll never get out of it. Or it's even like we're heading toward revolution because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The government can't function. We're just heading toward fascism. Because if democracy can't function, someone's going to come along and say, I'll tell you what, I'll just make decisions myself and not have to be answerable to like a committee. And you're like, well, someone's got to get something done. So now we have fascism. So you could say that, and think about the rabbis. Most of them are living in eras of absolute exile. So their attitude is, I think things have gotten so bad that we got shadow Sephirotic structure at work, and we are like living in this exile of the divine presence. But whatever metaphors they use, I mean, I could go on and on with them, but they're trying to say, between you and me, as a generically mildly practicing Kabbalist, that the system got sick. We are living in a sick system, and it is very, well, it's not very, it's somewhat quasi, it doesn't feel very Jewish along the lines of what Mike said. I'm used to the Judaism that said God made creation and said it was good. So Mike, I'm validating you, I mean, for real.
Well,
Are there Jews who said God made creation and it wasn't good? Well, let's take an example that Moshe Idel says was an extremely influential midrash in the rabbinic corpus, which is God made the universe and then destroyed it because God didn't like it. And God did this over and over and over again. And then God made this universe and said, this one's good. Well, Moshe Idel says, what kind of God is that? A God who basically destroyed a hell of a lot of universes. I don't know how great I feel about that God. Very similar to a Gnostic position that this universe has been turned, or like in a version of Gnosticism, this universe is run by an evil demigod called Metatron. And that Metatron figure finds its way into the Mishnah and into the Talmud and into Kabbalah. I never heard about Metatron. Did I know that this universe was run by an evil demigod called Metatron? Right?
Who said that God is done? It could be that this universe is only one of the iterations. This is work in progress.
So right. So now, we have the story of Noah and the rainbow and all that stuff. But what if this? So, for some thinkers in the past, they want there to be a war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, precisely to destroy this world and to liberate the sparks. I mean, so God has a chance to create a universe ruled by light instead of ruled by darkness. So I'm saying that it doesn't feel like the Judaism you and I invented or inherited, and it is a language that strongly found its way into the Catholic Church. Definitely. I mean, all I have to do is read Paul, and then read the Council of Nicaea, and you're talking about, geez, are even babies pure? Because I'm not so sure. Because of all the sin that attaches to material matter. But one quick thing I want to say is the klipot, because the klipot were here, and this is not a klipa. It's the klipot are shells. Matter is a shell surrounding and trapping reality. And at certain levels, they can kind of mix the matter and the dark and the light and kind of get by. And in others, the light's getting trapped and imprisoned. And so klipot could be, if you have an imprisoned energy, well, that could be a demon. That could be like a force that's going through the world. You know, it's a little bit like these TV shows where,
Okay.
I don't know, they're running around. Go ahead.
All right, I have a question, and it's segues something Mike mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session. So you mentioned that, well, like early rabbinical Judaism was influenced by Greek scholastics.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what were the contemporaries of the early Kabbalists around them? Was it mostly in Europe, or was it in North Africa, in the Middle East, you know, in Spain? Where were the first Kabbalists, and what else might they have been influenced by besides Tanakh?
So I haven't brushed up a lot on it, but I can give you the basics. So those who've read the basics before may already know my answer. But the theories are that there were already people trying to recreate Ezekiel's vision in the Second Temple period, before the Second Temple was destroyed. That Ezekiel's visions of the Merkabah and Isaiah too, we just had a Haftarah with them. They were saying, wait a second, this isn't just literary. Like he said he saw God's chariot, and he saw the image of angels, and these beings with multiple heads and these wings. It's the
We saw God.
we saw God. Right, thank you. We saw God. And by the way, there was no Kiddusha in the service until medieval Kabbalah invented it. So we got added Kadosh, 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 Adonai. They invented the Kiddusha because they felt that this was missing, which is the vision of Ezekiel and Isaiah seeing God. And so they built this prayer that we now do. Before, you just said, Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh, God is the divinity of holiness, and you moved on to the next bracha. So now we have a whole to do. We have a whole performance, which is a performance of angels and humans being examined by Adonai Tzvaot, which can mean God of the galaxies and the stars, but it also means the military commander. So they created a situation which is, you know what's really happening in this world, what the real drama is? The real drama is that we are being examined to find out if we're going to do God's will. It's good soldiers in the war of light against darkness that's going on, and are we going to strive to be tzaddikim because there's this invisible world happening, and the angels are part of it. I'll get off the topic. But back to Larry thing. There seem to be already forms, maybe I'm bad oversimplifier of ancient ideas, maybe influenced by the mystery religions of the ancient Near East and of Egypt, of Isis and Osiris, and the fact that there were mystery practices and secrets of esoteric knowledge you were brought into. Also, Neoplatonic thought. I mean, that's a little bit later, but still in the Second Temple period. It's sort of Plotinus in Judaism, which is that all of this scripture is really about remez, which is, it's all allegorical for the underlying Platonic structure of the universe. I mean, Platon's a really important thinker, very influential in the intertestamental period. So that the idea being that as early as 2,000 years ago and earlier, people were trying to adopt contemporary forms of contemplation and knowledge in order to experience God, and that's why we get the rabbis entering Pardes to envision God as the chariot did, and then it kept getting support from different branches of non-scholastic thinking.
This is all through the Dead Sea Scrolls.
And the Dead Sea Scrolls are a great manifestation of you can go to the museum in Jerusalem, the war, but this is not Kabbalah, but it is.
Wars of light versus darkness.
Right, the forces of light against the forces of darkness, the destruction of Metatron, the community that is saying that the entire world is polluted, including the temple and the priests and the Sadducees in the temple. And so we're going to bathe 1,000,000 times a day and basically hope that when the war happens, we're the only ones who are pure enough to actually get taken up into the universe of light when this one is finally, when Metatron is demolished. So there's lots of contemporary material. It's only, not only us, but some people always want to make the other Jews go away, but there's still other Jews. Mike.
So sort of maybe the big question. So knowing all this, what you've just been talking about, how does this affect what's going on tomorrow when there's murder and war and things like that? And if I understand it in these terms, what real difference does it make? I mean, I'm sort of getting down to how does this affect my life and how I relate to the world about me?
Well, first off, it will tell you that on some level, let's go, so if we're on a spectrum of, I don't care a lot about evil and I'm a Kabbalist, to I'm obsessed with evil and I listen to true crime Kabbalah podcasts every night, right? So like, if you're on that side of the spectrum, then basically, in the act of conception through sexual intercourse, that there's a reincarnation that happens where souls come down through the channel of the spirot and are born into bodies, and that you can have demonic souls. There are just a lot of people that have polluted souls, and you can have demonic souls who are bent on creating chaos and destruction.
Wait,
And-
how does it get through this sphere out and be demonic?
Because you are drawing from either a klipa, right? You drew from one of the bad, broken channels, or what they call Sitra Achra. So Sitra Achra is what in Star Wars they call the dark side, right? The dark force or whatever. The dark side, good. But in what Kabbalah they call the other side. So that if the right thing, yeah, I mean, so that so Sitra Achra is a way to say there are dark energies produced by, what do you call it when you have like a little bit of water off of a river and it just makes like a little stagnant pond?
Eddie.
Like a little eddy, good. My favorite show was The Courtship of Eddie's Father, so I'll call it Eddie. It was, okay. So, like, you drew that soul from there instead of here. I mean, I'm just telling you what they say. Don't kill the messenger. But like, so if reincarnation is a fragment of divine energy that comes, and we're all reincarnated, then where did your soul even start? Did it come through the pure channel of light in the combination of Yesod and Malchut, and hopefully your parents were in love and they did it right, it was midnight on Friday night, and so you already had this, I mean, it's very science fiction. There's already an alignment in the universe of the Malchut and the Yesod, whereas I told you, even if you're a mild Kabbalist, a mild generic Kabbalist like Ram Nadan, you can say, well, when a lot of people are keeping Shabbat, you really do have an effect on the system. Like, so I'm in this kind of, I live in a kind of a mystical, cosmological paradigm, and I'm like, look, I kind of believe that you can shift the energies of the world with a lot of people. Like, who would be singing for peace and saying Kumbaya if you didn't agree with that? You're like, if enough of us sing Kumbaya, like, things are gonna turn. I mean, that's a human way of thinking. So so you could say that, but there's Sitra Achra is from the dark side. You could draw a soul from the dark side. So an act of rape can draw a soul from the dark side. An act of incest, because it violates the Arayot that we read about in the Holiness Code. And if we want to know about holiness, probably should go to synagogue in Yom Kippur and listen to the Holiness Code. Or through an act of extramarital affair, violating, 10 Commandments. There are all kinds of ways to create a system in which you're drawing a wrong soul. And there are demonic forces. There are, I don't know, it's hard for me to say. Like, well, no, it's not so hard for me to say, but we had a hand up. Rob and then whoever. Let's take some comments and we'll see how it goes.
Just real quickly, so, I mean, at what point, some of these descriptions are so articulated, they're so mapped in such detail, and at what point does an acceptable Kabbalistic theology become superstition?
Yeah, and I no, because Rob's feeding me a lob, because it was what I said last time, which is, for anyone that gets into Kabbalah, this is as your rabbi, I'm telling you this, even if I'm not your rabbi, for one moment, let me be your rabbi. There's a danger in studying Kabbalah because it very quickly goes to superstition. So that what went from be sensitive to the energies becomes, it's so mechanistic. It's so mechanistic. It's like the opposite of what I would call having a sense of a larger mystical reality. It's like, oh, I can tell you exactly how the mystical reality works. And in fact, it sounds a lot like a very primitive Newtonian physics. It's all direct cause and effect. This thing that used to be this like divine reality, I only half understand, and it's really all these words to describe it. They're not really describing it because your brain would explode. Become like, no, your brain won't explode. It looks like a football field. And the 20-yard line is this. And the 25-yard line is this. And when you do this prayer, you go from the 24-yard line to the 25-1. But if you mispronounce the word, then it's a penalty and you go 5 yards back. And then good luck because you're going to give birth to a serial killer. You know, like, I mean, they map it out like it is so superstitious. And then it just becomes that fact that the world is so full of demons and energies, and someone can map them out for you, that everything's like predetermined. Everything's predetermined. Like there's no mystery in it at all. It's just like, oh yeah, you know, yeah, there are 3 demonesses living in the whorehouse in the center of the town, and they're seducing men as they walk by because that's what demonesses do. And yeah, Lilith is running around killing babies who are born and seducing their fathers. And what else do you want to know? Like as if we're talking about like, how do you get to Zingerman's, the shortest way? And so, you know, so the problem is that it happens in all of religion, I think, which is that you're kind of finally sort of opening your mind to God, and then your mind closes. And you're like, I have to understand it, and I have to understand it along the most ordinary paradigm that I have. And then it just becomes red strings and telling you how to live and mapping it all out. There's no mystery whatsoever. So how do you know? I mean, it's up to you to know when it turns, but it really turns kind of quickly in Kabbalah, and especially to me when you get to the Zohar. When I started out on all this, I'm like, just teach me Zohar, just teach me Zohar. And now the more that I've read, I'm a little bit more interested in Spanish and Cordovero stuff, which is a little bit earlier, although Cordovero is partly very as influence on Zohar. But like, I'm not interested in the demonesses who seized upon the seed. You know, that just sounds like bad folklore. It really just ends up, and it incorporates folklore. So then suddenly this is folklore, and I'm like, wow, that's not very exciting. But go ahead.
The concept, these big ideas of evil are very overwhelming. And I think they're very interesting, but I think it's really hard for me to extract something from it. But I think about, individual levels of evil or corruption and the traumas that create that.
Thank you. Yes.
Evil, and then thinking about how we can repair that over time and letting the light in and letting things flow. And I feel like everyone struggles at some point with being corrupted or traumatized by something, even the littlest thing, and it causes challenges. And so just being able to see that and then see how we're impacting our environment around us, because then we have the ability to project evil onto other people.
So I think that is beautifully stated, and I'll repeat it for people who are streaming, or repeat some of it, which is, what's the best part of this, at least the part I can take away? So one is, I'll start with something you didn't say, which is society. I do worry that society, when does society have no turning back? Because it's unsustainable, what's happening, let's say in this country, or in another society, in a Nazi society, or, so I think there are real resources within mysticism and Kabbalah to sort of start identifying how even systems, social systems, become sick and corrupt. And then, as you said, psychologically, I've watched, I used to study a lot of psychology, and my wife did too, we've talked about a lot and have a lot of books. You know, we've certainly seen in the last 15 years, a lot of psychology has gravitated toward the paradigm of trapped energy, of trauma. So the things that used to be limited to just talking about veterans of the Vietnam War, and then got expanded to veterans of all wars, are now, those same methods and structures are used, these paradigms are used to understand almost all psychological issues. Not all chemical issues, but then chemical issues can be triggered by trapped energy. So the idea of trauma. Almost everything now is species of trauma therapy. And this is very similar to trauma therapy, which is, you know, the eddy. Like things get trapped and then you can't move on. And then you're still re-experiencing the past and you can't get out. How do you get light in? How do you open up that system? How do you transcend a boundary that shouldn't be there? I mean, you're talking about bursting forth out of a klipa, you know, out of a boundary that shouldn't be there because you're like, you're not still living that, or whatever it is, or beyond. Just like, I want to feel differently. I want to have different motives. I want different thoughts to come to me. And so I think a lot of this, both I would say at the social critical level, trying to understand societies and leaders and how things, the momentum of things getting worse, and how things are so tipped out of balance, as well as trapped energy as people's psyche. Now, again, you don't want to be like, oh, great, I'm totally with you. Now let's get superstitious. Let's map out trapped energies. There are 12 different kinds, right? And they connect to numerology. And each has a different number. And you know, too bad you were named that by your parents, because now because the name your parents has, you have number 3. You know, like, so, you know, the same thing can happen, and it may well happen with this paradigm. It may come that the trauma paradigm ends up getting thrown out, because everything's a species of trauma to the point where it all loses its explanatory force. But I think that's a great example. And I'll get to Zevi. I definitely want to say again, though, the imbalance thing is brilliant. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, let's give it its due. Okay, everybody bow down to the imbalance, which is that everyone else wants to say, in a sense, where does evil come from? How can there be evil if there's only one God and there's no devil, or something like that? The idea that evil comes from imbalance is very, very, very deep, and certainly can be fundamentally embraced in a generic, mild, Kabbalistic, healthy paradigm.
So, speaking of evil and all, I hope that this comment and question is not going to be a monkey wrench into this discussion. Going back to what you mentioned before, I think in Hebrew, the evil, the demons, is shed.
Oh, yeah.
Shedim.
Right, yeah,
I-
shadim.
Now, one of them.
I thought he's not saying shit, he's saying shit.
That's what she-
Shadim, yeah.
Now, one of them is Ashmedai.
Mhm.
Another one is that I think was mentioned somewhere, the Molech, which is had to do with sacrifice. But the real confusion that I have with that is one of the references to God is El Shaddai. And I don't know where the Shaddai in the name comes in. How is that? Because if I were to change its the pronunciation, the vowel, from El Shaddai to El Shaddai, it means the God of my demons. El Shaddai is the God of my demons. Where exactly is Shaddai and fits into?
Go ahead. Say what you gotta say.
That is belief in God of the mountain.
Say again?
God of the mountain.
El
Well,
Shaddai,
here,
where's the mountain?
But it's not a Kabbalistic answer. I think what Zevi's saying is, how does it fit into the Kabbalistic system?
Well, where is the mountain in Shaddai?
The big Horeb, or,
No, the word mountain.
How? Mountain is how?
Not,
How?
but it's
Give up.
so when you're doing,
Shadim, what, the word for breasts.
Shaddai.
And
so you're talking about an argument about biblical grammar, about biblical, how you translate archaic and ancient words in the Bible, and Shaddai has been related to breasts. It's been related to whether Yud He Vav He originally was part of like a mountain god.
So El
But-
Shaddai.
But that doesn't relate to Kabbalah.
Okay.
In other words, if you're trying to answer, like, I'm looking at the Torah, I don't care about Kabbalah, Shaddai has multiple theories about what it means. One is, like I said, breast, mountain, something like that, kind of makes sense if we, but,
Wasn't that a
but
reference?
that doesn't answer the Kabbalistic question, which is, Kabbalah has a way, I would have to research the different answers to that, but it has a way in which the Shadim, I mean, there are also good angels in Kabbalah. So you have good angels and bad angels, or whatever, bad forces, and, right.
There's an Aleph and should.
But we're not doing Shaddai anymore. Okay, let me bring up another piece because I have to get done today, and then we'll go, which is only this. What other things can we, is Kabbalah saying, and that you may want to embrace or not embrace? And it only came up, I think, last time afterward, I think, when we were talking, just some of us at the table, or maybe I mentioned it. If your job in the world is to bring balance, if your job in the world is to properly channel divine energies so that you restore the proper imprint of the divine on this world and on you and on this moment, so you're trying to channel the right things, whether it's chesed, sometimes you're defining boundaries so that the flow happens properly, sometimes you're bursting out of the boundaries so the flow happens. If you're doing all of this, because your goal in a way is to bring Tiferet, a balance of the worlds, it's to bring harmony, and every time you do that, you're creating the possibility of more momentum in that direction. So that we're all looking to compound our actions. Everybody probably knows by now, I hate the idea of like doing mitzvahs because it makes it sound like it's arithmetic. Like we're gonna do a score at the end about who won the mitzvah Super Bowl, right? They did 47, they did 50, they win. It's not arithmetic because it's much more intercausal, which is you doing one balance could create 10 times more balance. Because by you shifting energies around, opening up the right kind of order and channels, it opens it up for others, right? So like one action could have a much larger effect than another action. So it's not arithmetic. One mitzvah doesn't equal one mitzvah, right? Because of the power of realigning worlds. And so in that sense, if you go more on evil, boy, those good angels are losing to the bad angels. But let's just say the world feels really corrupt, or there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of depression, there's struggling, a relationship is struggling, whatever it is. But you know, the synagogue's struggling, the town is struggling. Look at these protesters, it's pretty yucky. Then how is this world surviving? Now, this is very big in Kabbalah, and then it's embraced wholeheartedly, if not more, by Hasidism. So we should do, before we finish evil for the day, is tzaddikim. So the thing is, they're superheroes. It's very much like the Marvel universe, you know, where they've got, I don't know, Captain America working with Batman. So that we are really fortunate that there are people who are fighting the war for us, and they are aligning worlds. Now, there are different theories in different places. Certainly in Hasidism, they're your Rebbe. They're the Rebbes. And some Rebbes are more powerful than other Rebbes. And it's very magical. But like basically, they are, thank God they're fighting the good fight. You can go to other forms sort of Kabbalah, which is someone may not realize they're a tzaddik, and they're just doing, the distinction between tzaddik and saint is not huge. There's a distinction to be made, but they're kind of like people who are doing such amazing alignment, maybe through their natural menschlichkeit or humility. So sometimes in a Hasidic story, it could be the town fool. And that actually comes, if you say what the town fool, it goes all the way back to the Jerusalem Talmud, though, very mainstream stuff, which is you've got Honi, the circle maker, who's the uneducated guy who lives outside of town. All he does is draw circles. But if it weren't for him, we wouldn't all be alive because of the effect of those circles, like what he's able to do. While the rabbis in the Beit Midrash think that they're the ones who are fighting the fight against evil. So there's a lot of Jewish tradition about the figure who could be doing this work. And I'll give you an example you probably heard. So when we're all in synagogue on the Day of Atonement, we're trying to break open the gates of heaven. It's not just a literary metaphor in Kabbalah. We're literally trying to break open the damn gates so that our prayers can have an effect on this world. So like the channels, the klipot are shattered, and the highway goes right, through the backbone of God. Like it's all going up to God and down to us, and things are aligning. And you know those stories, like Hasidic stories, that says like all day long the Rebbe and everyone were praying and praying, and Nila was coming, and everyone was wearing their white, but the gate stayed locked until one little kid who wasn't supposed to be playing on his flute because it's a violation of Yom Kippur said, "I want to join in," and blew the flute. Gates unlocked, and so it's, we use these as little morality tales, right? And that's a great thing for a good modern Reformed conservative Orthodox rabbi to do. But they weren't supposed to be little morality tales, right? They were really about what does it take to open a gate, to break a klipa, what sincerity of that child, what magical effect did it have on the world? Or often it's the Rebbe. Often it's like nothing was happening until the Rebbe got there and was like, yeah, I'm late because I ran into this poor person, I had to feed them, what's going on? You're like, we got 20 seconds until Nila's over. And he's like, okay, hold on a second, gate's open now, Rebbe got here, right? So like part of it is that you have people who are doing good work in this world, and then I leave it to you. All I want you to do is not treat it like a silly story, but that's something to kind of go home with, which is, are there people who, does it come down to individuals who are actually kind of trying to align the world in some ways? Or if you're, that often is connected to the idea of evil, or if you're not so into the idea of evil in Kabbalah, then all of us. It's more like when I eat anything, what sparks am I eating? What was the place of that animal? I mean, did they grow up in a cage, tortured their whole life? I mean, seriously, you know what I mean? Or was it like my pet goat, that I bought for 2 zuzim? I had a good life, and now it's Pasach dinner. So, which is like, well, we'll get another goat. But they were happy. They got to be a goat. Like their destiny was to be a goat, and they got to be a goat in the great ecosystem of the mystical world in which we reside. So it could be that we're all there, because it all depends on what are you eating, and how do you free them, and what are you praying, and what are you thinking, and how open are your eyes, and what are you saying to the people in line, and how are you spending your time, and how awake are you, and are you liberating energies? Are you part of the trapping of the energies? So I think when you have less of the evil, I find it tends to be more personal centered. And then the more you see the world as kind of driven by a battle of good and evil, the more you have to get, your guru's fighting it for you. And remember, in Hasidism, the rabbis aren't coming from Yavne. They're not coming from Vilna. They're not coming from a yeshiva. Like the rabbis before Hasidism were coming from like yeshivas. They went to the Ivy League doctoral and postdoctoral programs. And then it was like, Rowan, well, I guess it could be a woman, let's pretend, okay? So it's like, Rowan, you're the #1 student in the class, and this is the top yeshiva, we're sending you to Odessa, okay? And they would appoint people to be rabbis for villages, and they go and they teach and do Jewish law. And then the Kabbalists, you don't have to go to any yeshiva, you just need another a Rebbe to say, you know what, Harvey, you got it, you got the soul, you're gonna be my disciple, you know what I mean? And you take over it. And so, because you're the one now, you're fighting the fight for the whole community, and then you say, thank you, I'm the Rebbe now. Okay, wait, let me see how we're doing on time. Okay, we're doing okay. Wait, who else? I know you guys want to speak because you guys have great thoughts. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet, one chance? Yes, Caroline, I forgot to get to you.
Yeah,
I did,
this
I never called her.
kind of fits in with what you're just talking about, but I'm thinking about like the tipping point where it goes from like, helping view the mystery to becoming superstition, and even what Jonathan said too, but it's like, if you're just going about your day, you're trying to be a good person, right? Like in a sort of utilitarian way. And then the Kabbalists are like, actually, there's these like blackness between the frames of the picture and the becoming, and it's like stuff you've never thought, and there's a hum, and everything you're driving home in the song on the radio is actually, it's going to be like connected to what we talked about, because there's all this stuff you don't know about. Okay, I mean, like for a lot of people, that would be really helpful, and to focus on things that they are not focused on. But then if you take it too far, like you said, it's not just becoming superstition, but and this is also like what Mike said about like it not sounding Jewish, but it's like when you talk about the battle between good and evil and the children of the light and the forces of darkness, that's always, it turns into demagogues. It turns into people who are so confident they know, as if there's any way for them to know, and there isn't, and they are like, oh, this, it's evil for women to make these choices with their bodies, and we must fight that and devote all our energies, and they gather a bunch of people, and then they persecute people, and then that is actually evil. I mean, in my opinion, obviously, I'm not gonna be the ruler of the world and say I know what's the light either. So it's like, it's just interesting. It's like, anytime someone is overconfident and believes that they just know these things that are so mysterious, and their whole point is that other people don't know, but then they're so confident that they know. And I mean, it's like a skepticism of authority. But even the Rebbe's, like, it's like if they're saying like, you the clock strikes this and you give them this name, and then darn it, your child's like bound to be a disaster for the rest of their life. Like that's not a helpful use of the Kabbalah. And so it's like what you're saying. Like it's.
Can I put it this way?
Yeah.
I mean, just a piece of it, because I love what you're saying. I mean, the Rebbe used to tell you who to marry because they knew better than you. That's giving up a lot of your power. Is that healthy? You know what I mean? Then again, the people were like, the Rebbe chose great. We were meant to be together. It all worked out. But I'm very skeptical of the power of giving up your power to the guru. And it's also weird because, like, I used to teach, when I've taught Kabbalah at different stages of my life, people are like, oh my God, like, you got to go out to the Isabella Friedman Center and do a retreat weekend. And I got these great people. I went there once, and I realized I never want to go again to places where they do like Kabbalah retreats, because I just feel like it's a lot of people pretending they're your guru. I'm definitely not your guru. I mean, I think you can see that what I'm saying is, I think I know something. I find this an incredibly compelling match for my own paradigmatic thinking. And as I said, I mean, if you're talking to someone who says, you can think I'm nuts, but I talked to my dead friend once, then, and other things, which is, like again, I'll hold up my hand, they can't see Alma, but so at one point in my life, I studied tantric sex. I wouldn't have thought that I thought those methods would, I mean, if you told me that 10 years earlier, I'd be like, oh, this is some BS stuff. And then it's like, it's pretty profound, and it worked, right? And Kabbalah talks about these kinds of manipulation of energies from masculine and feminine. So like, I think there's more to life than a good, like, okay, it's Yom Kippur, time for a bit of a Hasidic story, and we're all lost on the path, helping each other. And by the way, let's be more inclusive next year. And I think there's more to life than that. And so I find this stuff compelling for theology, but I'm really scared and skeptical of these self-appointed gurus and people who say, I know better, give up some of your power, your volition to me. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm a control freak. I want to do it myself. So I'm trying to give you guys the tools, like the tools for evil. I think some of the stuff really helps me. The balance stuff has really helped me. Some of the idea that, I like the tzaddik idea to confess that is the lesser kind of one, which is sometimes I just think that bus driver who drives the school bus for the elementary kids could be a tzaddik. Like, they don't have to be educated. They're the ones who kind of notice what's happening on the bus. They're the ones who have like the kind word just when my daughter needed it. They're the ones who have the sit your ass down, right when that kid needed to sit their ass down. And sometimes I feel it's those people who are sustaining the world. And so I really think that this is very, very rich. But I also think it's very, very dangerous. And when you get into superstition, you run the risk that they say at the end of Deuteronomy, which is that you're going to go to psychics and necromancers because, I know this person who is horrified that I became a rabbi and is anti-religious and thinks organized religion is all about brainwashing people and says I'm an agnostic, an atheist, and a scientist, but they go to a psychic. I think there are a lot of people like that. And anyway, Mike, and I know we have like 1 minute left.
I really enjoyed this evening, in part because it sort of says, what's my job description as a Jew? And
I'm going to finish with a quote.
What I heard you saying is that certainly one of them is to try to bring balance to the world, but also, balance in the room, balance to myself. But I have a question, because when I think about Judaism, you hear the mantra, Tikkun Olam.
Right.
And I'm wondering how that relates to balance.
So maybe that's a good
Well, it
intro.
does.
I'm literally thinking because we are in sync with the radio song. So let me read you from 13th century, very influential text I've quoted from before, Sha'arei Ora, the gates of energy, the gates of light. You don't have it in front of you. I have it in front of me. Because I'm the guru, like chill. You gotta get your Torah from me. Here we go. So that was also where we saw the explosion of the shattered vessels. So Sha'arei Ora by Yosef Gikatila. But if, God forbid, humans defile themselves, defile is also a matter and light kind of word, like you're getting dirty because you're matter. But if, God forbid, humans defile themselves by distancing themselves from Torah and mitzvot. Again, Torah is not a book. Torah is what the book is trying to guide you in the way. It's the underlying order that you're trying to conform to in this universe. That you're trying to live according to the actual way things work. If they distance themselves from Torah and the commandments by perpetrating evil, injustice, and violence, then the tzaddik stands to gaze on what they have done. And the tzaddik will seize and gathers and contracts his self and ascends higher and higher, and then the flow of all the channels ceases, and the Shekhinah is left dry and empty, lacking all good. So, in other words, there's a balance. So you're like, you know what? Religion's for other people. I don't care about kashrut. I don't care about going to synagogue. I don't care about following Torah. I certainly don't care about Shabbat. I go to the stadium, and you should too. And what happens to the tzaddik? Is the tzaddik going to fight that battle? Tzaddik is going to contract. And like the ability of the tzaddik to spread that energy, you're limiting their ability to fight. They're just going to connect to God. They're going to go back to like meditation. And the flow. So now you all passed today. Now you know what all of this means. The flow of all the channels, these are all the channels, ceases. And the Shekhinah, which is down here, it's the immersion of like the flow on our earth, it just dries up. And it lacks all good. One who understands this secret understands the immense power a human has to build or to destroy. Or actually it's and, build and to destroy. Now come and see the power of the righteous. They can unite Sfirot, and they can harmonize the upper and lower and the left and right worlds. They bring harmony and so on. And so the way balance relates to like drying up the flow. And I want to quote Rav Kook, who was a Kabbalist, one of the most influential rabbis of Israel, was there when it was still Palestine. And he was a Kabbalist. And I want to read one of these. Oh, good, I like this. We constantly aim to raise the holy sparks. We know that the potent energy we know the potent energy of the divine ideal, image of God, divine ideal. We know the potent energy, the splendor at the root of all existence. He's talking about what goes here in the connection of Tiferet here is called is splendor, and it's the root of all existence. It connects upper and lower. We know that the full Tiferet has not yet been revealed and actualized in the world around us. That point of balance and alignment. Yet the entire momentum of existence approaches that ideal. The ideal ripens within our spirit as we ourselves ascend. As we become aware of the idea, absorbing it from the abundance beyond finite existence, we revive and restore the fragments that we gather from life, from every motion, from every force, from every dealing, from every sensation, from every substance, trivial or important. The scattered energy stammers in its entirety, mouthing solitary syllables that combine into a dynamic song of creation. Sprinkling and then flowing, this life energy is suffused with holy energy. We raise these scattered sparks and arrange them into worlds constructed within us, in our private and in our social lives. In proportion to the sparks we raise, our lives are enriched. Everything accords with how we act. The higher the aspiration, the greater effort toward the ideal, The greater the action, the deeper the insight. The deeper the insight, the higher the aspiration. So that's from Orot HaKodesh, his famous The Energies of Holiness. So in terms of Tikkun Olam and things like that, I mean, it is a Kabbalistic context, although it's also in the Talmud. I quoted it in the sermon I did on redeeming hostages. And it functions there in Jewish law. But it is, like, we are constructing worlds. Our marriages, and so let's return for the final moment to that process. Our marriage is a process, right? It's not a thing. Our personality is a process. That whole stuff I did on narrative identity is basically saying our identities are processes, and how we describe that process changes the process, right? If I could tell you, you have this really sad story of your identity, now tell me a happy story about your identity that's true. You can actually get someone to like shift they're building a construction, they rebuild their construction of their own identity. I actually think you can do this really fast. You don't, it's not like, oh yeah, I know, it's like Woody Allen, he went for hundreds of years and then still had a crush on underage girls, right? No, it's like you can do a lot better than he did. Quickly, you can get there. So we're arranging in our work lives, right? Constantly I'm like, why is everybody, the workers are lazy, you know, the work needs to be done, Rabbi Tarfon said, like, how can I motivate them? Like we construct those worlds, and very famous text on this is like, on some level, feel everything that's happening to you as a musical note or as a sensation. And you take the positive notes, the sparks of energies are in the notes. Here, that's the blackness in between, is the note, hear the sound. And then put those notes together and arrange them into a construction of a universe. Your identity universe, your process universe, your workplace universe, your society universe, your campus universe. And so like, in some ways, it's very practical. You don't have to go for the superstitious stuff. I got to go see my Kabbalistic guru psychic, right? And they're going to tell me what color to wear today so that I align the energies. I mean, that's what it ends up being. But rather, more like, wait a second, this actually really describes the God I live in, the God reality we're really living in. It really seems to actually work. It actually seems to really function. And then your experience kind of starts to validate it, because you're like, so I will end with that.
So
Thanks very much.
after what you said, I'm going to answer my question. Tell me if I'm.
So I mean, you are repairing the
Is
world.
this notion, you're right, of repairing the world,
Yep.
of completing creation, is balancing the
Yeah.
world.
And
So
alignment, balancing, and
Yeah.
also alignment.
okay.
Yeah, and also like in a way constructing from the positive. Right. The only resentment I have is too often Tikkun Olam is reduced to something like social justice work, and I don't think we're benefited by a Judaism in which our Judaism is just a restatement of progressive politics. I mean, we're going to end up in a place of evil. You know, so it's not like, oh yeah, you know, I just dropped off my stuff at the food pantry, so I did Tikkun Olam. But I'm a jerk at work, I'm a jerk in my marriage, I'm unhygienic, and I'm always throwing the energies off. But I did Tikkun Olam. Because then you're just like, it's like, like I did a mitzvah. It's too easy. Yeah, and it's reductionist. I mean, ultimately, we're trying to say, are you living in a mystical universe, or are you going to reduce it to something so concrete? Like, you know, I did that. I did my Tikkun Olam for the day. But we all do. I mean, it's the human part of us that wants to reduce things to the concrete and easy, but we diminish ourselves. I mean, I like Kabbalah because I certainly believe that we are extremely powerful. But I also struggle with feeling powerless. I feel like, no, I'm not having any impact on this community. I'm not reaching anybody. But deep down, the God part of me, the religious part of me is like, all you have to do today is rebuild some worlds. And you know what? And if you failed yesterday, no problem. Just go out and rebuild some worlds today. Heal the soul.
Go to the beach.
Go to the beach.
We're putting together
Right.
the same castles.
Do you see these classes are continuing through the month?
Yes, the classes, I'm gonna finish out February.
Oh, okay, so.
Sorry, sorry, I sent it out to the constant contact list, but I haven't announced it very well. But I tried to send out some emails about, the class goes through the end of February, and then we'll shut this one down. We'll figure out if we
For
want to
about a
do.
week and then continue in March?
Well, no, we'll see what we want to do, or maybe we'll do something else, but yeah, this Kabbalah Intensive 1 ends at the end of February.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions for you.
Here, I'm gonna pause this.
So what happens?
Can you wait for,
Oh,
maybe ask my
I
question?
apologize, I made a comment.
So let me see if I can.
I, no, I just know.
Thanks.